Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are tackling a really um, fundamental debate in the history of medicine. It's one that still echoes, actually, in how we think about health.
Yeah, it definitely does.
It's the classic showdown, germ theory versus biological terrain theory.
And this isn't just, dusty history. Understanding these two very different ways of looking at why we get sick, well, it gives you a really powerful lens for modern health approaches, too.
Everything from public health down to what you eat.
Exactly.
So we've got this fascinating research report here that really digs into this whole conflict. And our mission today is basically to unpack these two ideas. We'll look at the key people involved, the evidence presented, and how modern science is kind of bridging the gap
Trying to make sense of it all.
and figure out what it all means for you right now.
Fundamentally, you've got Louis Pasteur focusing on the external invaders, that's germ theory, and then Antoine Béchamp focusing on the body's internal environment, the terrain theory, the invader versus the battlefield almost.
Okay, let's dive into that historical showdown then.
Right, so let's start with Antoine Béchamp. He was working back in the 1800s, and he's really seen as the pioneer of this terrain theory.
And his big idea revolved around something called microzymas. Is that right?
Microzymas, yes. The source describes them as these tiny molecular granulations. He thought they were like the most basic units of life, sort of tiny enzymes found everywhere in living things.
And he thought they could survive death. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, incredibly resilient, like these fundamental biological building blocks that just persist. But the really key thing for Béchamp was that he didn't think they were fixed.
Okay.
He developed this idea of pleomorphism. He argued these microzymas could actually, well, transform into bacteria, yeast, even mold, depending on the environment around them, the terrain.
Huh. So not a fixed germ species,
Yeah.
but something that could change its form, like a microbial shapeshifter, depending on the conditions inside you.
Precisely. Think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but for microbes, driven by the body's internal state. He saw this as absolutely central to why disease pops up.
So it wasn't just a bug attacking, it was the internal conditions causing these basic units to become the problem.
That was his view. It connects to his idea of life is the prey of life. These microzymas breaking down matter, cycling life, but potentially shifting forms based on the terrain's health.
Okay, so on the other side, we have Louis Pasteur, a bit younger, hugely famous figure, pasteurization, vaccines. He championed the germ theory.
Right. And Pasteur completely disagreed with Béchamp's shape-shifting idea. He was all about monomorphism,
Monomorphism, meaning
meaning microorganisms have fixed forms.
Yeah.
Specific species. A bacterium is a bacterium, end of story. It doesn't morph into something else.
got it. And for Pasteur, getting sick was mainly about external invasion?
Exactly. Pathogens come from outside, they get in, they overwhelm your defenses, and that's what causes the disease. The focus is squarely on the invader.
And his work really paved the way for, well, modern medicine as we often think of it.
Absolutely. Interventional medicine. Developing specific treatments to target those specific invaders, antibiotics, vaccines, antiseptics, that flows directly from Pasteur's framework.
It's interesting, the source mentions Claude Bernard, too, around the same time, father of experimental physiology.
Bernard introduced the concept of the the internal environment.
Which sounds a lot like terrain.
It does. While he wasn't pushing Béchamp's specific microzyma theory, his work emphasized how crucial stable internal conditions are for cells to function. It showed the body isn't just passive. Its internal state deeply affects biology. It really supported the idea of the terrain mattering.
The report also briefly touches on others, like Virchow looking at cells and environment, and later figures like Ender Lane and Nazens who explored ideas related to pleomorphism too.
Yeah, others picked up threads of these ideas.
Okay, so let's really get into the core principles now, starting with terrain theory from Béchamp's perspective. What's the absolute foundation?
The foundation is that the internal environment, the terrain, is the critical factor. It determines your health, your susceptibility. A strong, balanced terrain resists illness, even if germs are around. A weak terrain, well, that's when problems start.
And what defines this terrain? What makes it strong or weak?
According to the source, several key things. Cellular metabolism is a big one, how well your cells make energy, clear out waste. Then there's pH balance, acid-base homeostasis. That affects enzymes, membranes, immune function, everything.
Okay.
Oxidative stress management is crucial too, balancing free radicals and antioxidants. Think aging, inflammation, and of course, nutritional status, having the right building blocks, vitamins, minerals, everything the body needs.
And connecting back to pleomorphism,
Hmm.
how does the terrain link to that shape-shifting idea?
The theory suggests that pathogenic behavior isn't inherent in the microbe itself, but it emerges when those microzymas get stressed by an unhealthy terrain. So the same basic unit might be harmless or even helpful in a healthy body, but turn harmful if the environment degrades.
Wow, so the terrain doesn't just affect if you get sick, but potentially what makes you sick in the first place, according to this theory.
That's the core idea, yes. The environment shapes the organism's behavior.
All right, now let's flip that. Core principles of germ theory. Pasture's side.
Okay, so foundationally, monomorphic pathogens. Germs have stable, fixed forms. You can identify them, classify them, target them.
Makes sense. And the mechanism,
External invasion. The problem originates outside the body. A specific microbe gets in and causes trouble.
which leads to.
Specific causation. This particular bug causes this particular disease via a predictable pathway. Find the bug, you've found the cause.
And the solution follows logically.
Interventional strategies. Kill the bug, block the bug, neutralize the bug. Antibiotics, antivirals, vaccines, sanitation, quarantine. It's all about dealing with that specific external threat.
And Robert Koch really formalized this, didn't he, with his postulates?
Yes, Koch's postulates were developed to provide rigorous proof, a scientific checklist, essentially, to link a specific microbe to a specific disease.
How did that work? What were the steps?
Well, first, you had to find the suspected microorganism in every case of the disease, but not find it in healthy individuals. Second, you had to isolate that organism and grow it in a pure culture in the lab.
Okay, isolate it. Then what?
Third, you take that pure culture, just the bug, introduce it into a healthy, susceptible host, and it has to cause the exact same disease.
Right. Prove it causes the illness.
And finally, the fourth step. You have to be able to re-isolate the very same microorganism from that newly diseased host. It was a really powerful framework for establishing specific causation in infectious diseases.
So you've got this deep historical split. Béchamp, internal environment is key. Microbes change. Pasteur, external specific bugs cause specific diseases. Microbes are fixed. Seems totally opposite. But flash forward to now, where are we? Is it still one or the other?
Not really, no. Modern science is showing it's more complicated. The source puts it nicely. The truth is that germs can make you sick, but the health of your microbiome helps determine the germ's effect on you.
Wow. Okay, that one sentence really seems to connect them, doesn't it? Germs are real threats, but your internal state plays a huge role in how you handle them.
Exactly. And microbiome research is just a perfect example of this. We now know our bodies host trillions of microbes. And they're not just hanging out, they're essential.
Doing what exactly?
Oh, everything. Training our immune system, helping digest food, processing nutrients, producing vitamins, even influencing our metabolism and making neurotransmitters that affect our mood. It's incredible.
And things like diet, they massively impact this microbiome, right? Which then impacts our immunity and health. It sounds very terrain-like.
It absolutely does. It shows how environmental factors directly shape this internal ecosystem and how that ecosystem in turn affects our resilience. It's not simple invasion anymore. It's complex host-microbe interaction.
Epigenetics, too, seems to lean heavily into the terrain idea.
For sure. Epigenetics shows that things in our environment, diet, stress, toxins, lifestyle choices, can change how our genes are expressed without changing the DNA code itself.
Like dimmer switches for genes.
Sort of, yeah. They can turn genes on or off, making you more or less susceptible to certain diseases. The source even mentions these effects can sometimes be passed down generations, transgenerational effects.
So our environment, internal and external, is literally talking to our genes. And crucially, these epigenetic changes can sometimes be reversed by changing the environment. That feels like a big nod to the terrain concept's relevance.
It really validates that our environment has a deep molecular impact. And then there's systems biology and network medicine.
How does that fit in?
Well, instead of looking for a single cause, systems biology views the body as this intricate network. Everything's connected. It shows most chronic diseases aren't caused by one thing, but by multiple interacting factors. Complex causation.
Not just A causes B.
Right. Health and disease emerge from the overall state of this complex network. It's less about one broken part or one invader and more about the system's overall function and resilience.
Which sounds much more aligned with the terrain idea of a complex internal environment determining outcomes rather than just bug X caused disease Y.
Precisely. It embraces complexity.
Okay, so how does all this translate into actual therapies today? How do these perspectives show up in the clinic?
Well, if you're coming from a terrain theory angle, The focus is on optimizing that internal environment. The idea is make the terrain robust and it can handle microbial challenges better.
So what kinds of approaches does that lead to?
Things aimed at building resilience. Nutritional medicine is huge, personalized diets, functional foods, making sure you have optimal levels of vitamins, minerals, fats, detoxification protocols to support the body's natural processes, pH balancing strategies.
And lifestyle stuff.
Absolutely critical. Stress management, exercise, sleep quality, even social connection, all seen as vital inputs for maintaining a healthy internal terrain.
In conventional medicine, still largely rooted in germ theory.
The focus there remains on targeting the pathogen or preventing exposure. So, antimicrobial treatments, antibiotics, antivirals, antifungals, vaccination programs are a cornerstone, and sometimes surgery to remove infected tissue or drain abscesses.
It's like fortifying the castle versus attacking the invaders trying to breach the walls.
That's a pretty good analogy. And what's happening more now, which is really interesting, is the rise of integrative approaches, combining elements of both.
Like functional medicine.
Exactly. Functional medicine explicitly looks for root causes. It acknowledges microbes, but puts huge emphasis on the patient's terrain diet, lifestyle, environment, genetics, the whole picture.
The source mentioned Dr. Maisha Treat connecting terrain to community health, too.
Yeah, seeing the broader implications. Precision medicine is another area, using detailed personal data, genetic, microbiome, environmental to tailor treatments. That naturally involves considering both germ-related factors and terrain-related factors. It's about holistic understanding.
Okay, let's talk strengths and weaknesses. Germ theory first. Where does it really excel?
Its power in tackling acute infectious diseases is undeniable. Clear cause and effect led to game-changing treatments like antibiotics and vaccines. Think smallpox eradication, controlling tuberculosis, treating bacterial pneumonia, massive public health victories, reduced infectious disease mortality dramatically.
Hard to argue with that, but the limitations.
It struggles with complex chronic diseases, autoimmune conditions, heart disease, diabetes, neurodegeneration, where there isn't one clear microbial culprit. The focus on killing microbes has led to huge problems like antibiotic resistance and messing up our beneficial gut flora.
Our microbiome.
Right. And it can be an oversimplification. It doesn't fully explain why two people exposed to the same bug have vastly different outcomes. That's where individual susceptibility, the terrain, seems to matter a lot.
Okay, now terrain theory. Strengths.
Its big strength is the focus on prevention and optimizing overall health before things go wrong. It recognizes we're all biochemically unique. It takes a holistic view, integrating lifestyle and environment, and it aligns well with modern systems thinking about the body as a network.
And limitations. The source was quite specific here, particularly regarding Béchamp's original mechanism.
Yes, and it's crucial to get this right based on the report. The source states very clearly that germ theory denialism, the outright rejection that germs cause infectious disease, is pseudoscientific. And it says this denialism is rooted in Béchamp's empirically disproven in the context of disease theory of pleomorphism.
So let me make sure I understand this according to the source. While the general idea of the internal environment, terrain being important, is supported by modern science like microbiome research and epigenetics, Béchamp's specific claim that microzymas constantly morph into harmful bacteria based only on terrain, and that this is the main cause of infectious disease, that specific mechanism isn't backed by solid modern evidence.
That's the conclusion presented in the source, yes. It distinguishes between the valuable concept of internal environment influencing health and the specific, unproven mechanism Béchamp proposed for how infectious diseases arise via pleomorphism. Other limitations mentioned for a purely terrain-focused approach include the difficulty in standardizing treatments compared to targeting a specific bug. And, critically, the potential danger of delaying necessary conventional treatment for serious acute infections if you only focus on optimizing terrain. It doesn't offer much for immediate life-saving interventions in emergencies.
Right, like the tetanus example, you need the antitoxin now, even if you're also working on your overall health.
Exactly. You need the right tool for the job. Which leads us nicely into the modern synthesis.
So it's not about choosing sides anymore. It's about seeing the value in both.
That's really the main takeaway from the report. Both offer essential insights. Germ theory is absolutely critical for acute infectious diseases. You need to identify and deal with specific pathogens, like in a pandemic or treating bacterial infections.
But terrain theory principles are indispensable for tackling complex chronic conditions, where multiple factors, including lifestyle and environment, are at play, and for prevention, for building health in the first place.
Precisely. Terrain approaches are powerful for long-term health optimization and preventive medicine. So the most effective healthcare likely needs both strategies that address pathogens when needed and strategies that strengthen the body's internal terrain and resilience.
It feels like that integration is the future.
It certainly looks that way. You see it in emerging fields like precision microbiome medicine, environmental medicine,
Hmm.
even things like chronobiology, how our body clocks influence health, and psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection. They're all exploring these complex interactions.
And how's this showing up in clinics?
Well, personalized medicine is a big part of it, using all that data, genetic, microbial, environmental, lifestyle, to tailor care. It's driving development of new biomarkers that can actually give us a window into someone's internal terrain. And it leads to more comprehensive preventive strategies, not just avoid this germ, but build your resilience this way.
This really changes things across the board, doesn't it? For doctors, patients, public health.
Absolutely. For healthcare providers, it points towards needing broader, more integrative training. Assessing the patient has to go beyond just hunting for a pathogen. It needs to encompass their overall terrain.
And for patients, for you listening.
Understanding both perspectives is empowering. It helps you make better informed choices, whether you're dealing with an infection or managing a chronic condition. It highlights the power you have through self-care diet, lifestyle, to influence your own terrain. You become a more active participant.
And for public health policy.
It suggests we need to focus on improving environmental factors and promoting healthy lifestyles alongside traditional infection control. It's about strengthening the population's overall resilience, not just fighting the latest bug. Policies need to address both sides.
So, wrapping this up, we went from this 19th century clash, Béchamp versus Pasteur, terrain versus germ, to seemingly opposite ideas that fundamentally shaped medicine.
Mhm. And we've seen that today, the smartest approach isn't about picking one winner. It's about recognizing the vital contributions of both. Germ theory for those acute infectious threats, terrain theory principles for understanding chronic illness, promoting resilience, and focusing on prevention.
Yeah, the report really emphasizes that the future lies in integrating these perspectives, understanding that complex dance between pathogens and our internal environment. That's what leads to truly personalized, comprehensive care.
And as the science keeps evolving, digging deeper into the microbiome, epigenetics, all these connections, the underlying wisdom in both frameworks actually becomes clearer. The challenge now is implementing that integration effectively and rigorously, but understanding both definitely helps everyone, providers and patients, make better decisions.
It really does.
So just as a final thought, thinking about how both the external threat, the germ, and the internal state, the terrain, are important. How might applying that kind of dual focus, that integrated view, change how you think about your own health choices, maybe even starting today?
That is definitely something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into a debate that is clearly still so relevant until the next time we take a deep dive into the sources.